What's up, Blockchain Nation? All right, so let's get into it. You're here watching this video because you've heard a lot about Bitcoin and how it uses a lot of energy and how it's damaging the atmosphere and emitting a lot of CO2, and how Bitcoin mining in itself will eventually, if it will continue to scale or continue to do that, it will raise global temperatures. I mean, it's something that you hear all the time. So I'll show you this real quick. Is this recording? I hope it is. Okay. I'll show you this real quick. It's a talk which you should watch by a couple of CEOs were being addressed or asked questions by Congress, and of course the Bitcoin emissions issue came up. I'll just play this real quick. You can watch it.
Madam Chair, thank you so much for everyone to coming forward in regards to this point. Cryptocurrency like Bitcoin currently consumes enough energy to power a small nation, and that's something that continues to be missed in this debate around this issue. And the University of Cambridge analysis estimated that Bitcoin mining consumes 121 terawatt hours a year. To put that in perspective for everyone, that's more electricity than the entire country Argentina consumes. That's more than the consumption of Google, Apple, Facebook, and Microsoft combined. One Bitcoin transaction, a single purchase, sale, or transfer uses the same amount of electricity as the typical U.S. household uses in more than a month. And so this is really outstanding to me, and many folks do not know this. Many Americans and folks that are talking about this issue. And so, Ms. Dixon, can you explain why for cryptocurrency like Bitcoin that rely on proof of work model mining is such an energy-intensive process?
Yes, so there we go. We hear it all the time. We say there are different points. People say Bitcoin mining uses more electricity than a small country. People say that Bitcoin mining will cause global temperatures to rise by 2 degrees. People say that a single Bitcoin transaction uses more electricity than 24 American homes in a day. The last thing that you hear, or not the last, another one is that if everybody started using Bitcoin, its network will continue or consume more power than the world has to offer. So is this true? I mean, I'll point to a video here that you guys should watch that I watched while I was researching this, and he raised a lot of valid points, and it's a very good one to watch. And first of all, we can go and debate this whole thing and back and forth. The question to even ask is, when you talk about the legacy banking system, how much energy do all the ATMs, all the banks that run 24/7 use? She said that Bitcoin uses more energy than Google, Facebook, and Apple combined. Is that really true? Is that really measured? Have they looked at the energy that all these companies use? I'm not trying to knock Apple or Facebook or the likes, but I think, in my personal opinion, this is somewhat of just a biased, I would just use the word attack on Bitcoin, because the pundits don't have anything else to say or to use, so they use this whole energy debacle, which, anyways, we'll go into all the details and then take it from there. So she mentioned an article by University of Cambridge, which I have not read, but something that I would reference, or that is referenced a lot, is this: Bitcoin's emissions alone could push global warming above 2 degrees centigrade. So this is something that a lot of people reference. It's an article by Nature Climate Change, and this publication in itself is interesting, and they've gone into a lot of details to say a lot of things about Bitcoin, and I don't know, I can't attack or talk about every single thing. Talks about amounts of CO2 produced by Bitcoin usage, and how Bitcoin's pollution is not very energy efficient. It will raise global temperatures and risk global warming. But before we go into all this, let's just talk about what really is this whole Bitcoin mining. Bitcoin uses a concept called proof of work. Proof of work just simply means a group of miners or nodes on the Bitcoin network all take turns in solving a very complex math problem. So what they do is they take all the transactions from a mining pool and they put all those transactions in a block. So all these miners are trying to add that block onto the blockchain. So in order to do that, they have to solve a very complex math problem by using specialized software and hardware. And that the first miner to complete that problem and add that block to the blockchain gets rewarded with Bitcoin. So as of the time I'm recording this, the block reward and the Bitcoin has some transaction fees, and as of now the block reward is 6.25 Bitcoins, which at today's price of Bitcoin agrees about $297, almost $300,000 for the miner that gets to that. So that's what the proof of work concept is. The great thing about proof of work is that it allows the network to be extremely secure, because the more miners, because miners are incentivized to be on the network and to mine for Bitcoin, because you can see the block reward is very handsome. So currently Ethereum, Bitcoin, and Litecoin, as the time of recording, it was Ethereum still uses a proof of work concept, which makes it a very, very secure network. And so the argument is that well, there are over 1 million miners around the world, and the argument that people make is that all this mining is causing global temperatures to rise. There's a lot of CO2 emissions and a lot of arguments about that. Well, let's go into all the details about that. What's the first fact? Now, the problem with the white paper, if you read through it or take the time to review it, which I haven't extensively, but at a very high level, one thing they said was that Bitcoin adoption will grow exponentially based on 2017 trends. So if you look at the statistics that they referenced here on this, they mentioned, where is that? So code availability, raw code used for this study are publicly available on this. So if you look at this GitHub page, and then you look at some code, this is Bitcoin data of 2017, carbon Bitcoin, to get data on Bitcoin. So this is the carbon footprints. And if you look at all the assumptions that they made, is that if you look at what they're saying, they use a lot of 2017 data. Now in 2017, the price of Bitcoin went crazy, and it was a huge moment for Bitcoin in terms of adoption. A lot of people flooded into Bitcoin, and the price went from $3,000 in early 2017 to almost $20,000 at the end of 2017. So a lot of assumptions they're making in writing this paper is that they're using that 2017 trend to say that this is how Bitcoin will evolve over time. But as we know, things changed a lot in 2019, 2020, or even closer to the pandemic. We didn't have those kind of 2017 movements in 2019. So the idea of using 2017 projections and using that to see how Bitcoin would scale or how Bitcoin would be adopted, in my opinion, might not be very, very accurate. Second thing, they said that Bitcoin produces 3 billion transactions a day. That cannot be possible because Bitcoin only does about 100 transactions a day, because a single block takes about, at most a single block takes, I can't remember, it's about 3,000 transactions inside a block. So I don't see how Bitcoin can do 3 billion transactions a day. Second flaw. Now, the energy to produce a single block, people keep on going about how the energy to produce a single block is the same as the energy to produce a single transaction. They are very different. Like what the senator just said, she mentioned that how the energy consumption or the energy used to produce a single block is worth a certain amount of terahashes, a certain amount of I forgot the units of account, but it uses a certain amount of energy. But what people don't forget is that a single block has thousands of transactions. So for you to say the energy of a single transaction is equal to the energy of a single block, I don't think, in my opinion, that's very correct. Second thing is that another thing that they mentioned is that Bitcoin miners use a lot of fossil fuels, which is not true. There's a report I'll go into, but something about I saw about Coinbase. And Coinbase mentioned Bitcoin is bad for the environment. Bitcoin mining is an energy extensive process. And the real story is that significant portion of Bitcoin mining is powered by renewable energy sources. The actual number ranges from 20% to more than 70%, according to Cambridge's Bitcoin Electricity Consumption Index. And so a lot of Bitcoin mining doesn't use fossil fuels. It uses, currently as we speak, most of them are using renewable energies, which we'll also get into. Another argument is that the total energy output will triple while the hardware used to mine Bitcoin will not. So they made the assumption that even as the energy output increases, what they fail to realize is that there's a lot of incentive for miners to have more efficient mining rigs. So the normal graphic user interfaces or the PCs we're using to mine Bitcoin are not the same as the ASICs that are used to mine Bitcoin today. And studies show that a lot of research is going to those areas to make those machines even more performant and even much better. So what my point is, the hardware is only going to get better, so which means that they'll become more energy, they'll use less energy, and they'll become more performant. So in my opinion, that is also flawed as well. So but we can argue about this back and forth. People can say yes, Bitcoin is more energy, and there's a difference between energy usage and CO2 emissions. For example, arguably a Tesla uses more energy than your normal car that uses gasoline. It uses more energy. But in terms of CO2 emissions, obviously a Tesla electric car emits less CO2 than what your average fossil fuel car or your average gasoline car would produce. So there's a difference between energy consumption and CO2 emission. Sometimes they think that they are synonymous, to say that, okay, just because it uses a lot of energy, it's very harmful to the environment. It's like during this time of year, Christmas, as the time of recording this video, it's December. In December, most families in the United States use a lot of energy because they use Christmas lights. So energy consumption is a lot during Christmas, but does that always translate to CO2 emissions every single time? Anyways, what we can argue that forever. But here's one thing that you should know about Bitcoin that's very, very important. Is that no one really knows how much energy Bitcoin really uses. This is just some analytics using some guess or some projections or some sample data, but can we really measure this? But even if you say, let's even say we can. The powerful thing about Bitcoin in terms of energy usage is something I want to address, and is that Bitcoin can be used in areas where energy is wasted in terms of renewable energy. I grew up and born and raised in Nigeria. Nigeria is an oil producing country. When oil is being produced or crude oil is being drilled, there's a lot of gas that is flared. So the gas flaring is just energy that is just wasted. Now the gas that is flared when crude oil is being produced, you can actually use that for Bitcoin mining. Hydroelectric power that you use in dams, you can use that for Bitcoin mining. Solar energy. Now during the day, there's a lot of energy that is produced, but at night, there's less energy from solar panels. So sometimes solar panels have a lot of energy sitting on the panels that is just wasted. So you can also use that excess waste solar energy, and you can also use that for Bitcoin mining as well. So you can use solar, you can also use wind, the same concept with wind. So areas where energy is quote unquote wasted, which is renewable energy, you can actually use it to mine Bitcoin, which is very powerful. Countries like El Salvador are experimenting with using nuclear, using volcanic energy. So even if you can argue, let's say you win the argument that Bitcoin uses a lot of energy more than most countries, but we can also use, it can augment that by using sources of energy that otherwise will be wasted, and that can go into Bitcoin mining. And I don't know which other payment system can do that. So I'll also show you this report which you should read. It's by Square and ARK Invest, and it talks about this, how Bitcoin is key to an abundant clean energy future. It talks about how Bitcoin mining presents an opportunity to accelerate the global energy transition with using renewables, solar and wind. Bitcoin miners are as a flexible load option could potentially help solve much of these intermittency and congestion problems, allowing grids to deploy sustainably more renewable energy by using solar and wind. And it also talks about, it's a great article that you read in details, and it also talks about how energy management software services are being developed. The energy managed marketplace. So managed marketplaces could emerge to connect project developers and miners and financiers. One key challenge could be solving the current creditworthiness threshold requirement for existing miners, and also ASICs, like I mentioned, are being manufactured. New chip foundries could be built to meet the expected surge in demand. Samsung and TSMC, one of the largest producers of microprocessors, are leading the way to recent announcements of new North American plants. And so this is something what we're reading in terms of how renewables can be used to mine for Bitcoin. And last thing I'll say is that, as a quote by Andreas Antonopoulos, that Bitcoin is energy agnostic. It is dependent on the willingness of government to tax the economies that emit harmful carbon into the air. What that means is that if you live in a country, or if you're setting up a mining rig in a country whereby the government doesn't really care too much about CO2 emissions, and they're using fossil fuels or like coal, which is harmful to the environment, well, the Bitcoin miners would probably use those sources of energy. But if you live in a country whereby they give carbon credits and they encourage to use more carbon or more CO2 friendly energy sources like solar and renewables, and then Bitcoin mining is energy agnostic. You can set up a mine that uses those sources of power. Lastly, what Andrea said was, if governments regulate and tax carbon, then Bitcoin demand actually supports and incentivizes, and in a way subsidizes, the installation of renewable energy. So my point is, if renewables, or if saving the reducing the carbon footprint is a goal of any country, well, Bitcoin mining is energy agnostic. We can definitely use renewables. I don't know which other payment structure or payment system can boast of using renewable energies to run its infrastructure, and Bitcoin does that seamlessly. So there are about, the Reddit article I'll reference is about 70% of Bitcoin miners around the world, and they're close to the minimum miners use renewable energies. And I see a situation whereby you have, in fact, almost all, if not all, Bitcoin miners using renewables, because it makes sense to use renewables because it's energy that's going to be wasted anyway, and you can use that energy and you can mine Bitcoin, and you can also benefit from the carbon credits in countries that give carbon credits for using renewables or for leaning on wind, solar, and those other forms of energy. So, in my opinion, this whole debate or this whole talk about how Bitcoin uses so much energy, I think it's just another attempt to just kill Bitcoin, because they've tried to throw every single thing at Bitcoin, but it's still the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world when it comes to payment system. And I think that when this whole energy debacle is behind us, they'll find something else to complain about Bitcoin. But I believe, in my opinion, that Bitcoin is here to stay and is the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world when it comes to a payment system. It is the most secure payment network in the world, and I'm excited about the future of Bitcoin. So, like I always say, till next time, my wish for you is that you know more about crypto, because crypto is changing and will change you all. And those who get involved early, in my humble opinion, will greatly impact the future. And if that is you, let's go change the world.
If you would like to create more awareness for your brand or content, or you would like to earn additional income, register now on www.kleekey.com. The more you share, the more you earn. Kleekey.